Hello and welcome to the Grid NASCAR preview show. Richmond Raceway tonight, a Saturday night race. Will Austin Dillon be a contender this evening? Plus, our Pick a Winner segment. Welcome. I am Tanner Smith, editor at pitboxpress.com, and with me, my esteemed colleague Matthew Bro from gridnetworktv.com. A big thank you to our Patreon investors as always, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. And just to let you know, there is a link in the description if you would like to join that class of investors. And there's also links to Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube Super Chat. But, Matthew, let's get right into this. Now we're heading to the capital of Virginia. 2 races remain in the NASCAR regular season, and Richmond is hosting their one race of the year for the NASCAR Cup Series. It is the first race there since the infamous finish of last year's race with Austin Dillon, Joey Logano, and Denny Hamlin. Dillon is starting up towards the front in 11th tonight, so can Austin Dillon be a winning contender and establish credibility after last year's debacle?
As much as I never thought I would say this, I think he can be, Tanner. I really do. And it's just because it seems like when everything hits the fan over at RCR, for some reason they bring a lot of pace here to Richmond. I don't know if there's a science behind it or something like that. But you notice, Kyle Busch, his teammate, was belt to butt, it seemed like, in practice. And then you go on social media and you're like, why the hell did Kyle Busch qualify 28th? He was fastest in practice. He was fastest, I believe, in 5-lap, 10-lap, 15, all the way up to 30-lap averages. It's just, I don't know what happened there. But then Austin Dillon qualified 11th, obviously, and he's another driver who he had the pace last year. I think we can say what he did was wrong, which it kind of was. He tried to send Joey Logano into the grandstands and then Denny Hamlin. But at the same, obviously not that serious, but at the same time, he was a contender for most of that race. And I don't see why he couldn't do it again, to be honest with you. He sits, I'm just looking at the standings. That's why I'm looking down. He would need the win, obviously, being 28th in points. This is definitely one of his worst seasons as a full-time Cup driver. And his teammate Kyle Busch is technically could point his way in if he has 2 55-point days and the guys in front of him just completely fall off the face of the earth. So he's in a must-win as well. So I don't know if the credibility would be reestablished, right, Tanner? But at the same time, I really could see Austin Dillon finishing in the top 10.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment there that Dillon has an opportunity to get a very solid finish today, something that, unfortunately for the RCR bunch, they've struggled to attain this year. But with that said, I do feel like this isn't the kind of race that leans into Austin Dillon's skill set. I think that last year, having that balance between the option tire and the primary tire kind of helped the 3 team be a bit more aggressive in the setup that they had and ultimately end up contending and then winning the race, we'll say. But yeah, I think that if Austin Dillon goes out there and has a very strong night where he earns stage points in one, if not both stages, and gets a solid top 5 to top 10 finish and stays in the mix most of the race, I think that it'll, kind of help him a little bit in terms of his reputation in the fan base, because honestly, after last year's race where tensions were certainly high for that week afterward, I think that he lost a good amount of credibility in the fan base and amongst, probably people in the industry. So I think that, like I said, a very solid top 10 run today where he can, run up at the front with some of the regulars that, obviously contend every week, such as Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, etc. If he can run up there with those guys and race them clean, I think that'll go a long way in helping repair his image a little bit. Now, moving on, obviously that controversial finish last year overshadowed a great race with 2 tire compounds. Austin Dillon, at the end of the event, did have the fastest car, but the race was taken completely out of his hands when Ryan Preece and Ricky Stenhouse collided with 2 laps to go right in front of him, bringing out a late caution that triggered an overtime finish. Now, Ryan Preece, with a brand new team at RFK Racing, sits on the pole for the event and has been quite good at short tracks, probably due to that modified background that he has. RFK teammates Busher and Preece sit 16th and 17th in the NASCAR playoff standings. 34 points is the difference between the two. Matthew, is Ryan Preece in a must-win situation tonight?
I feel like that's a yes and no. And the reason why is because I'm going to say yeah. Mainly because the likelihood of someone random winning Daytona it's very high, as we saw last year, Harrison Burton winning. But at the same time, a guy like Tyler Reddick's so far ahead, he's probably going to get in unless something completely drastic happens. And then Alex Bowman, another we're going to talk about, he's also really far ahead. So I don't think Busher is going to have, especially with Busher's skill set, winning at Richmond before and winning at Daytona before. I don't see a scenario where Preece gets in these playoffs unless he does win tonight, Saturday, the August 16th, or if he goes to win at Daytona. I think he's more likely to win here today. Obviously, he was named one of the 40 best wheel and modified drivers ever. He's definitely won and gotten a lot of experience at Richmond. So I think, he should be in a must-win. He hasn't run the best here in his career. Looking down, a lot of his finishes were in the 20s and 30s, obviously racing for JTG Dotery at the time, now Hayek. I wouldn't say it was the best equipment he was in, but at the same time, he did finish 5th with Stuart Haas back when Chris Buescher won the race with RFK. A couple years ago, actually, was my 22nd birthday, funny enough, not that anyone cares. However, I'm just saying with Ryan Preece, I think his best bet to get in the playoffs is to be a must-win, because he will definitely probably not make the playoffs if someone else, like if Buescher wins tonight, Ryan Preece, I don't see a chance where he will win Daytona. I think it's going to be a whole mental dynamic set, and I don't know if you're RFK, you think one of those two is going to make it. You think Buescher is going to make it. You think, or Preece, one of the two. But Brad K has the second best betting odds tonight too. So is Brad going to stink it up and get both of them out of the playoffs? So I feel like RFK unfortunately started the year, you think at least 2 or 3 of the guys were going to make it out of the 3. Now you could be 1, and it's quite possible that none of them can make it. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see.
I agree that it'll definitely be interesting to see, but I don't think that Ryan Preece is necessarily in a must-win this week. I do think that he needs to take advantage of that pole position and what I would assume is that very first pit stall at the very end of pit road. That'll obviously give him an advantage coming out of the pits. That said, Ryan Preece hasn't had a whole lot of success at the Cup Series level, even at tracks that we would think he would be traditionally strong at, such as Martinsville, Richmond, even Iowa last week. He, had, speed at times on the race, but only really got up toward the front at the end because he had better tires than some of the cars ahead of him. At a track like Richmond, which does have a similar layout and a similar concept to Iowa, I would suspect that Preece would be able to contend here, but genuinely, we don't know that. I think that the 60 team, if Buescher isn't really capitalizing on stage points tonight, the way Preece might be able to as the leading driver of the team, starting up at the front, I think that Preece should try to close that gap in as much as he can. I don't think that his teammate would race him, improperly in any way. Chris Buescher is generally a very clean driver and doesn't tend to ruffle feathers very often. So I definitely don't think that it would be within his character to rough up a teammate by any stretch. So I think that Ryan Preece, 34 points off of the cut line right now, you can make a significant stab into that with a really good run tonight and really good stage points tonight. But it also hinges on Chris Buescher's performance. And obviously, as you mentioned, Matthew, Buescher is a former winner here. Team owner and driver Brad Keselowski is a multi-time former winner here. He's got a lot to contend with, even in his own team. And not only that, you've also got the other 37 cars out there, or I guess tonight it's like 34, 33, whatever. Like, you've got all the other guys in the field that you have to race against, and I think that's what's going to make it difficult, especially going for his first career Cup Series victory. Moving on, though, obviously we have 13 different winners of the 36 full-time drivers, leaving 23 drivers able to punch their ticket into the playoffs with these last 2 weeks. 15 winners are possible, so that does mean at least one driver will get in on points this year. The favorite for that right now is Tyler Reddick, last year's regular season champion. Highest in points right now, 117 above the cut line. Alex Bowman, 60 points above the cut line. Matthew, could the 45 team play conservatively this evening and focus on positioning themselves well and, kind of push this off and bring a fast car for Darlington to make sure that once they get into the postseason, they start out with a bang?
I don't think they should play conservatively because, in all honesty, Reddick can start and park these next 2 races, and I'm very confident that he would make it in the playoffs. And I think one of their biggest mistakes, to be honest with you, last year was when they locked into the championship 4, and then I think it was last year, put on an absolute snooze fest at Martinsville. It was like they didn't even bring the right type of car there. And I think that kind of hurt a little bit when it came to going to Phoenix because obviously he wasn't the champion, and I don't really think he was ever a legitimate threat at all to be the champion in that race. So for him, this is Tyler Reddick's not notoriously known for being a short track guy. I think that's the one. He doesn't have a lot of weaknesses, and I can't really say it's a weakness, but Reddick just isn't a short track guy. I think he had 2 career top 10s here in the 8 to 10 races he's done, and they've all come in the last 2 races, I believe, here. So 23-11 seemingly understands Richmond. I think Bubba Wallace is another guy who both these 2 drivers, I'm not even going to talk about Riley Herbst, but when Reddick and Bubba come to Richmond, it seems like they're always within the top 5 or top 10 in the running. So this is like one track I think Reddick's kind of understands from a short track perspective. So I think you go out there and you try to win. I don't think you should play it conservatively because if you do, I think it's just going to switch the mindset a little bit. I think you have a great driver here who I'm looking at would be 7th in the points. So he's lucky he's not going to have a Ryan Blaney or Truex season from a couple years ago where he would miss. I really don't think it's mathematically possible he misses, but he's got to have the worst karma in the history of the world if he were to miss the playoffs. So I think you got to focus on running well. Like he almost won last year too. I believe he was in the top 5. Obviously, that was Austin Dillon's race to lose, or Joey Logano's as well until that happened. But you notice when everyone was wrecking, Reddick and Bubba, the 23-11 Toyotas at the time, were right behind Austin Dillon. So I think he should not play it conservatively. I think you go out there and you get your points and you try to win the race because you are going to be in. But if there's 3 DNFs, Tanner, he's going to be in the race, be in the playoffs. So that's how I feel about that.
Indeed. Yeah, I feel that Reddick going with a conservative approach completely goes against everything that Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin stand for and created this organization for. Not only that, like, you don't stand to gain anything by being conservative tonight. Like, you need playoff points desperately. You haven't won stages this year. If you're the 45 team, you've got to go out there and get some wins, even if it doesn't really materially matter to your chances of actually making the postseason at this point. And I feel like starting from the 2nd spot tonight, you've got a really good shot to possibly take the lead right off the get-go from Ryan Preece and, cruise to getting a playoff point potentially, depending on how this race plays out. But personally, if I was the 45 team waiting for Darlington to come, which I know is one of their best tracks and the only reason that they struggled there last year, probably had more to do with Tyler Reddick's gastrointestinal system than anything else. But with that said, I feel like, Reddick has shown a lot of strength at this track, shown a lot of growth at this track especially. As Matthew pointed out, Reddick does only have 2 top 10s here in his history, but He only has one finish worse than 20th. So, I mean, he's never been like truly bad here necessarily. He's just not really been particularly strong here either. So, I think that if you're the 45 team, you've got to come into this night with an aggressive mindset. You should stay up in the mix, you should stay in contention, and you should go for the win. Now, moving on to talking about the NASCAR playoffs, they do leave many in a must-win situation at Richmond. As I displayed earlier, there are 23 full-time teams and full-time drivers that are still vying for a chance to make the playoffs. Last year, Austin Dillon took out Joey Logano and then also Denny Hamlin to win the race on the same lap. NASCAR took away his playoff spot, but he still kept the credit for the win. Later in the year, though, Martinsville and Austin Dillon were involved with the Bowtie Brigade. So, Matthew, seeing how the teams and manufacturers are taking it very seriously, the implications of making or not making the playoffs, should NASCAR anticipate some controversial maneuvers tonight?
I don't know, honestly. I think Martinsville was a whole different scenario. I think getting into the playoffs versus getting a championship four appearance out of it. And I think you saw the guys getting penalized or at least reprimanded about the whole, what was it? I know it was Chastain and Dillon, and obviously Bubba Wallace as well for the Toyota camp. That whole scenario that happened with Bell and Byron. Also, I completely forgot about that. And then when you said that, I was like, oh my God, I forgot that happened. But yeah, I don't think there's going to be controversial moves, but you never know. We could be having this conversation tomorrow at noon Eastern, and we'll be like, can you believe what we just saw? So anyway, for that, yeah, I mean, I guess who would be the controversial when you look at the standings? I mean, does RCR do something where Dillon moves someone out of the way for Kyle Busch? Highly doubt that. If you're RFK, you have two guys. Probably only one of them is going to make it in. Do they do something? Probably not. Hendrick Motorsports, you have Alex Bowman's the only guy who's out if there's two winners, and he's not one of them. Obviously, he wouldn't make it then, but he seems like in a safe spot. Do you do something for him? Probably not. I think there is way too much of a risk for very little of a reward. As you see before, when there has been any sort of race manipulation, there have been times where they've added drivers to the playoffs before, or the chase technically at the time. So, yeah, I don't really see there being anything. I think the manufacturers have learned, hopefully, their lesson about it. And I think we'll see some hard racing. I think Richmond does give the opportunity, though, to full send someone out of the way, but you have to do it in a way that wasn't Austin Dillon's way of doing it. I can't even say maybe Ty Gibbs at Martinsville in the Xfinity Series, moving Brandon Jones out of the way. I guess if you're going to wreck someone, learn how to do it where it doesn't seem that bad and the data shows that it wasn't that bad. I'm not condoning that, but I don't know. I feel like guys who are already have wins this season, to be honest with you, besides someone like Keselowski, I think those guys are going to be up towards the front anyway, battling for the win. So I don't really think there's going to be an even opportunity to have a race manipulation.
I'm not going to completely rule out the possibility of race manipulation, but I do think that, to NASCAR's credit, and I do not often give them credit, they did add some penalties for manufacturers this offseason to help offset these kind of circumstances from happening. And again, you got to applaud them for that. You do have to occasionally hand it to them when they do well. So I'm going to do that. However, I am not completely ruling out people being a little sneaky throughout this event, especially if, some feathers get ruffled, so to speak. I think that, you've got to look at a team like RCR, especially given how last year's race played out. They're certainly in a desperate situation at present with, as Matthew displayed earlier, they both don't have the points or the requisite performance necessary to go contend for the title this year at present, but a win completely changes that. And they do have a third car entered into this race. I do think that is important to consider. Jesse Love is piloting the 33 C4 Energy car again this weekend. And I think that it's better to be cognizant of stuff like that when, we're getting late in the regular season, extra cars in the field. You never know what could happen, especially with an organization like RCR, who clearly has a different relationship with reality and the truth than a lot of other teams, considering their fallout after Austin Hill's suspension from the Xfinity series. So, yeah, I think that if, you're in the field tonight, I definitely think that NASCAR is going to have their eyes set on everybody as much as they possibly can to try to spot anything before it happens. But I also think some teams might be stupid enough to try pulling a fast one on somebody, and hopefully it'll work out for them and, flow it under the radar. But we have seen Richmond become a venue for chaos in the past when it was the direct cutoff race for the playoffs back in 2013. Obviously, the Spingate incident with Clint Boyer, Martin Truex Jr., Brian Vickers, and all of Michael Waltrip Racing, which ultimately ended up dissolving that team outright within 3 years, which is insane to think about. Do you really want to risk that kind of damage to not only your organization monetarily, but also from a reputation standpoint? I think that it was hard for sponsors to want to link up with Michael Waltrip Racing and, guys like that. They ended up losing Napa over the whole deal, and I think ultimately Aaron's ended up leaving the next year, and they ended up losing Clint Boyer. It just, kind of snowballed from there, from that initial incident when Clint Boyer's arm got itchy, so to speak. So I think that if you're a driver in the field, then I think you just need to do your best to go out and win the race rather than to go out and play the race, which I don't think anybody would look highly upon. Looking forward, though, unfortunately, the amount of controversy generated by the playoffs over the years has only increased, unlike the television ratings for the playoffs, which have steadily decreased and then plateaued. It doesn't appear that the playoffs are really building stature among the fandom and many in the sport. In fact, in Portland, one popular topic was the IndyCar playoffs, which every driver shot down expeditiously. Now, some are taking the win and you're in controversy and applying it to Shane Van Gisbergen. SVG broke the rookie record for wins in a season by netting his fourth win last week, and all of his wins this season have come on road courses. And now that puts him at the second seed in the playoffs with Denny Hamlin, taking the top spot at the moment. There is a group out there wanting a reduction in road courses, some even saying down to 2. Matthew, is this a valid argument at all? And is this just because of the playoffs that this discussion is taking place?
I can say it's valid, but doesn't mean I can't call it stupid. Because when you think about it, Tanner, right? I don't think people were complaining when Chase Elliott was winning all of them or when Kyle Larson was winning everything. Now you have the big Kiwi from New Zealand comes over belt to butt every single time you're on a road course, and now everyone wants to have a problem with it. It's not fair to Shane Van Gisbergen to don't hate the player, hate the game. And the game is this playoff system. And I think the more we talk about it, somebody could probably put a compilation of me being pro-playoff because I don't mind the playoffs. But then the more you do your research into what has happened in NASCAR and the champions that have been crowned in NASCAR because of the playoff system. We had a whole Grid Network chat last night about Matt Crafton in the playoffs and then Ben Rhodes in the playoff system. So it just shows that it might not always generate the person who should be the champion. Like, should Corey Haim or Carson Hocevar be a truck champion? Probably. But just to get back on track. Now, I don't know if I don't care where Shane Van Gisbergen wins. I don't care if it's on a road course, an oval. If you're telling me you have to pick between 2 drivers right now, the guy in 24th who has 1 win, 2 top 5s, and 1 stage win, or the guy 4 points behind him in 25th with 4 wins, 4 top 5s, 3 poles, and 2 stage wins. And you're going to tell me, honestly, you're going to pick the guy who has 4 more points just because he won on a non-road course this season in a strategy call race. I can't believe it. Nothing against Josh Berry, who that is, but if Shane Van Gisbergen somehow outscores Berry at Richmond, which is arguably one of Berry's best tracks, he does incredible here. I'm not knocking him at all. Berry does a very good job here. And then Daytona, if Shane Van Gisbergen scores 5 more points than Berry in these next 2 races, Van Gisbergen won't be that guy you can hit on because Barry's going to be the one at the low man on the totem pole. He's going to be on the bottom. So I don't think it's a valid argument, but I'm going to call it not. I feel like it was rude to call it stupid, so I apologize. But because everyone's entitled to their opinion, which is very fair, that's why I love to do this. But at the same time, when you look at NASCAR's schedule, I've talked about it on previous shows before. I love the idea of NASCAR's schedule and the balance it has when you have 6 road courses, 30 other courses or races throughout the year that are not road courses. There's a perfect balance, I believe, of 2.2 miles and above, 1 to 1.9 miles, right? And then short tracks. I just think the balance is good. I think what NASCAR does wrong is they schedule the same type of track right next to each other. And I think that turns people off to the idea when you have 3 road courses in 5 weeks, stuff like that, or back-to-back less than a mile track like short tracks. So that's kind of how I feel about it. That's my long rant. I apologize about that. But you can say it's valid, but you can also don't be upset when somebody doesn't appreciate that because we weren't having this conversation before. And I think 5 to 6 road courses is perfect for one of the most diverse motorsports going to every single type of track. And then regarding IndyCar in the playoffs, I think that will kill that series. I think IndyCar doesn't get enough credit personally. I think it's one of the best series in general in motorsports, and it just hasn't had the same marketing tools. It just hasn't been put out there to show how great it really is. And I think a playoff system will, one thing it does differently than American motorsport is not have a playoff system, right? That's a deciding factor that I think they need to keep. They really need to do it. Now, if Fox wants to really get involved and change it up, good for them. I don't know what they're going to do. But yeah, that's kind of my long rant. I apologize about that. I like road courses, as you can tell, and I like the balance of it on NASCAR schedule.
Yeah, no kidding. First of all, I just want to chime in on the IndyCar side of this. Please don't do playoffs. Nobody wants them. Nobody. Not the fans, not the drivers, not the teams. I doubt the network wants it. So just forget that idea ever existed and move on. But, obviously IndyCar is run by people that remember when televisions were first invented. So, of course, they are having trouble, attracting the youth to the audience. So that's neither here nor there. Let's stick to NASCAR. I do want to agree with Matthew's earlier sentiment that he later thought was a little too harsh. I think it is stupid that people want to go back down to 2 road courses a season. Again, as Matthew so eloquently put it, we have one of the most diverse schedules in motorsports with the NASCAR Cup Series. We have a really good balance of tracks to race on. We have fantastic, diversity in our scheduling in terms of just the venues that we go visit. I do think, to Matthew's credit, that we do need to spread those road courses out a little bit more, especially some that are in hotter markets. Like, I don't understand why in the Fox portion of the schedule we only have 1 road course and it's just COTA. So I think that it would be beneficial to the schedule to possibly move some of those road courses up in the schedule a little bit so we can have a few more ovals in the summertime and maybe a couple more night races. I think everybody would enjoy that. So I think that people that don't want road courses on the schedule are just silly. I think that we have very few venues that can pack in as many people as Watkins Glen, Sonoma, the Chicago Street Course, potentially the San Diego Street Course on the military base. These road courses, because of their size and scale, have the ability to fit in so many more people than an oval track. And I think that's something that gets lost in this. I mean, Road America hosted 2 Cup Series dates in 2021 and then 2022, and they got over 100,000 people to those races every time. And if you look at somewhere like Phoenix, where we host the championship race, the most that they can really fit in there is about 56,000 people, 42,000 in the grandstands, and then 14,000 in camping and in infield. So, when you look at the raw numbers, they're bringing more people to the races, the road courses are. Now, I think there's a lot to be said about the racing product at road courses. I think it could be a lot better, but I think we've been beating that dead horse for a while about the next gen car, that it could be better, but unfortunately it's what we got. So I think that getting rid of the road courses is kind of kicking the can down the road, so to speak. I think that it's a band-aid to a problem that isn't the track's fault. I think if we had a better car that was more suited for these types of tracks, we wouldn't have these discussions. And I think ultimately blaming SVG for the butt whoopings he's been putting on these guys is just laughable. Like, it's not his fault that these guys can't get good or keep up with him. I'm going to be honest with you. I think had Ryan Blaney stuck with that strategy with SVG and just mirrored everything that he did last week, he would have at least been like in contention. But because they decided to diverge, it ended their chances of contention. They got a stage win out of it. Hope that was worth it. But, you could have really made a statement beating SVG last week if you're the 12 team, because it seemed like they definitely had the speed in their car to possibly pull that off. Whether that would have lasted over a 30 lap run towards the end, we'll never know. We do have a question here from Denver, one of our most frequent commenters. We love to see you in the chat, Denver. Do you see NASCAR teams going fishing for road course drivers, seeing that the Trackhouse Racing, seeing the SVG success with Trackhouse? What do you think, Matthew?
Yes, I think they've already kind of done it, right? We've seen Cam Waters, Will Brown, hopefully Brock Feeney sometime, Brody Kostecki, another one.
Joey Hand.
Yes, Joey Hand, exactly. Great talent, and I think the issue is Shane Van Gisbergen is in his own level of. So I think Trackhouse picked the perfect driver who I don't think anyone better except maybe a Scott McLaughlin could have come over and done what Shane Van Gisbergen is doing. I still think Scotty Mack, if he wanted to try NASCAR, could have 5 wins by the end of his career, and I think it would be a fun battle between those two. But yeah, the only issue I think is maybe Red Bull Ampul 888 over there saw that Brock Feeney seems to be really interested, the 22-year-old phenom over there. So they're like, well, the next half decade, you are staying with us. So I don't think Brock Feeney or Will Brown they were the two you would think would make that switch, and now they're stuck. I can't really say stuck, but they're on the best team in supercars for the next 5 years at least, right? I think it's like 2029, 2030. Cam Waters is one, though, I would keep an eye on. I think Brody Kostecki is another one that could come over a little more often. And I think now that there's going to be Toyota, Ford, and Chevrolet over in supercars, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we'll see even more people because the Toyota camp doesn't seem to have that same opportunity to bring over drivers from pretty much the most similar type of car, I guess you could say. I mean, Kamui Kobayashi, another one, Juan Pablo Montoya. Those are 2 drivers that Toyota brought over, specifically 2311. I don't think you can really compare more legends to young up-and-comers like a Will Brown, like a Brock Feeney. So I think that's a great question on Denver. I think the team should already be doing it. I don't know about probably more one-off money, and I think this is going to bring up the charter stuff. I think if there's a higher payout for drivers, I think if the teams get bigger slices of the pie, pretty much, and there's not that much of a discrepancy between open teams and charter entries, pretty much how much money they get, I think we'll see even more drivers coming over. Because why are you going to get hundreds of thousands to $1 million worth of sponsorship to come over and be at a loss? It doesn't make any financial sense, especially when you consider traveling from the other side of the world to get here. So yeah, that's just kind of my long answer about that one.
I think that if we keep the NASCAR playoff format as is with the win and you're in system, I think that if you're a team that's kind of on the fringe, like a Colleague Racing or a team like Front Row, perhaps, I do think that could be something you should try to be interested in. I think that, especially with Front Row, I mean, there is not a driver on their team that has won a cup race, and I think that has kind of led to them backsliding a bit this year. So, bringing in a driver like Brody Kostecki, a Ford driver with Dick Johnson Racing, Cam Waters, another Ford driver for Tickford, I think that, bringing one of those guys over to run a race would probably be beneficial to their whole program, not just for the simple fact that he could go out there and win, but from the standpoint that it could help you have better data to help train your drivers with. I think that is kind of what's getting lost in all this. So I think that if, you're one of those teams on the fringe, it should be something you're looking into, but I think that if we see a change in the playoff format or see it be completely depleted altogether, I think that changes a lot of minds, and I think that will make those mostly road course guys have to really adapt to ovals very quickly to have a chance to get into the postseason. We have another comment here from A Day in the Life. Gentlemen, does SVG consider IndyCar if NASCAR reduces the road courses in 2027? I think he stays the length of his contract with NASCAR and Trackhouse. I think he's signed through 2028 now. So I imagine he's just going to stay in the States and stay in stock cars until they tell him to leave.
Yeah, I think that's IndyCar, though, with Scotty Mac's success, obviously. I think that could be an avenue when SVG's in his early 40s, mid to late 40s, I think, when it's coming at the end. I think the charter system kind of screws him, for lack of a better term, though, with how IndyCar is now set up. I don't think we're going to see a lot of open entries, if you can even have open entries. I'm not as familiar with IndyCar, obviously, but I think that's a good question. It makes you think, really. It's like, I kind of want to see a seat swap, how they did I think it was, obviously, they did the Lewis Hamilton and Tony Stewart one, and then they did Fernando Alonso with someone a couple of years ago. Jimmy, thank you. Someone as in one of the best driver of all time, arguably. My bad about that, Jimmy. But yeah, so I think it would be so awesome to see a Scotty Mac and SVG swap, considering they're two of the best all time in their first motorsport discipline. Now they've both come over and done great things in their own in their new disciplines. So I don't think you see that success often. But hey, hopes one day IndyCar with SVG. I don't know. Denver saying SVG will do the double. I think Connor Zilic is more likely to do the double, but could you imagine a Shane Van Gisbergen double? Not the sidetrack, but that would kind of be really fun to see. I think he has the endurance. I don't think he wants to do it, though.
I think if SVG did it, he and Scotty both have to do it. I think it would be one of those things where they both have to commit to it. And I think Scotty would be more than happy to do it. But I would love to see so many drivers do the double. So SVG is definitely on that list and is very high up, but I would also like to see his oval craft improve in NASCAR before I put him in an IndyCar, which is a completely different animal. Moving on here to our final question, and Adam here says, Ryan Preece will be fun to watch tonight starting from the pole. Totally agree. Let's talk a little bit more about RFK racing. So a repeat winner will guarantee that two drivers will get in on points instead of just one. This would help RFK as Buescher and Preece are battling for the bubble. But if someone else wins, not an RFK or a Tyler Reddick or Alex Bowman, then RFK has two drivers on the outside looking in at Daytona. So, Matthew, who are you looking at tonight to potentially upset the field and RFK's playoff hopes?
I think a lot of guys can do it personally, but I think if there would be any upsets, it would probably be the RFK guys, right? I was going to say AJ Allmendinger, but then I looked at his results in a Colleague Racing Chevrolet in the Cup level at Richmond. Funny enough, he has finished 27th 3 races in a row. That reminds me of Riley Herbst at the start of the year, finishing 17th in the first 3 races. I think that's more impressive than anything, if you can find a random position on the grid and finish there multiple times in a row. But yeah, and then besides that, 29, 27, 26, 37th are his most recent. So Allmendinger, no. But Preece, I think, could be a threat. I think we've turned the conversation on Ryan Preece to not if he wins, but when. I think I will say every time I'm on live air, on broadcast, apologize to Ryan Preece. I didn't realize how good he actually was, and I think he's showing it that he's more than capable of winning at the Cup level. I just think he's got to do it sooner rather than later. But just another guy too, upsetting. I wouldn't call Chris Buescher an upset though, because he's would be 10th in points, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So I don't. Is it an upset if Joey Logano comes from 38th to first? I don't think about that, but it wouldn't really be a playoff upset. Is Kyle Busch considered an upset? I think he's got really one of the best odds. And then, so my two guys, one would be probably Kyle Busch being an upset, which I never would thought in my life I would say Kyle Busch being an upset winner, but he is in pretty much a win and in scenario. And then I think Brad Keselowski could win this race, but that kind of helps RFK's playoff hopes. But then again, if you're Keselowski, he's up to 21st in points now, Tanner. So it's he really isn't too far behind Preece and Buescher, but he is at the same time. So it's if you're Brad, do you want yourself in the playoffs, or would you rather see a guy like Buescher or Preece? Preece doesn't have any playoff experience, but Buescher's a legitimate threat, in my opinion. When he gets hot, I think he can make the round of 8 at the minimum. So, yeah, just looking through the standings. Ty Gibbs has been quite quiet. I don't really see him being a threat. John Hunter Nemechek, and that's a name I don't think we ever mentioned on this broadcast, but he was second fastest in practice. Yeah, I don't know where did he qualify. I didn't look too much in depth with that, so I apologize. But I could check right now. Really,
Nemechek is 34th.
Okay,
so the top of the practice charts both ended up dropping way down the qualifying charts.
Yeah, so I can we cut that? I know we're live. Can we cut that last 20 seconds? I think Eric Jones, too, could be a driver who, even if he hasn't shown speed, I think Eric Jones can win. It's just he's got to do it again. I think he's more than capable. Now he's over 100 races as well on a winless streak. All the other guys' upsets, though, I don't really see much. This is a weird track. I don't know, but ultimately we're going to find out very soon.
Indeed, we will. As far as drivers I'm pinpointing to possibly, make some noise tonight, I think that, obviously Joey Logano, even though he's starting shotgun on the field, I think that he showed a ton of speed here last year. He would have had 2 top 5 finishes. One of them would have been a win had he not gotten completely bowled over in the final corner. Obviously, Nemechek was fast in practice, but I don't really expect that to follow through into the race. Kyle Busch is definitely somebody I'm targeting tonight. He and Bobby Allison are tied for the best average finish at Richmond Raceway with a minimum of 10 starts, and we all know how long Bobby Allison raced for, so that's really saying something, especially given that we're in Kyle Busch's 21st Cup Series season. Looking upward through the field here, a guy I am not targeting tonight is Ty Gibbs. This is going to be a tire management race, and that kid just does not have those skills at this point in his career. I think Daniel Suarez logged a really good run here last year with the really soft tires. I think that, that might be something that 99 team can build on for this year's race, but he is the top Trackhouse qualifier in 21st, so it just looks like that team doesn't quite have everything figured out. I like the Eric Jones call out. I think that he has shown, a lot of pace this year at different tracks, and I think in a tire management race, I think that this might lean into his skill set a little bit. I think Carson Hocevar, who is a Truck Series winner here, has a very solid shot at contending for the win if he can take care of his stuff and not get into too much trouble. Austin Dillon, obviously you got to look at last year and how strong he ran and take that into consideration. Brad Keselowski, as you said, obviously a really strong runner here. Obviously a multi-time winner at this facility and has been honestly one of the hottest teams of the summer in the 6 team. And AJ Allmendinger, I know that he hasn't had a ton of great performances here in the next gen era, but if you look back at his career here, he does have a couple of solid runs. He had back-to-back top tens with RPM, Richard Petty Motorsports back in 2010 and then 2011. And then when he was racing with JTG Doherty, he also got a sixth place finish here. So it's not like he is completely falling off the face of the earth at this kind of a racetrack. And we're talking about a guy who is a very long-term veteran in the series. He made his first start in the Cup Series back in 2007, and he's practically been here ever since. And I think that at short tracks where, you know, downshifting might become something you end up doing during this race to, you know, try to get a better run out of the corner as your tires wear, I think that you could see someone like AJ with that RCR Alliance have a really solid race today. But we'll just have to see. Now we look to be moving on to our final question here, but it does look like we do have another comment here from A Day in the Life. I love to see Scott McLaughlin and Shane Van Gisbergen in equal equipment at the Indy 500. Hey, me too. It would be amazing to see that happen. Anyhow, we're moving on to our Pick a Winner segment. So this is the time of the show where we decide who we're going to pick to win this race over 400 laps, 300 miles at the Richmond Raceway. Adam here says that he's picking Denny Hamlin. So, Matthew, I'm going to start with you. Who do you think is going to win? Oh, John here also says he's picking Kyle Busch, and earlier he said go Austin Dillon. So, got an RCR fan in the chat for sure.
Sorry, John. Don't be mad at us. We apologize in advance for that. But it's tough. This is, I think, you and I, and then a couple others in NASCAR. We've been hitting it on the head, I think, lately, and I think that's because of Shane Van Gisbergen, obviously. But getting Hamlin right, getting Bubba right. So I had a tough time thinking, but I'm trying to maintain my lead. So I guess whoever you guys are going to pick, maybe I'll pick them too. No, but I had a debate. It was either going to be Kyle Busch or Denny Hamlin. So I'm just gonna say Denny Hamlin. But I think Brad Keselowski will be a real threat too. So I'm gonna go with Denny Hamlin. I might change it on Twitter. I don't know, but tentatively it's Denny Hamlin.
I'm also going with the Chesapeake, Virginia native. I'm going with Denny Hamlin. I think in a race where you've got to save some tires and, you know, bide your time and be a bit more clinical, I think that Denny Hamlin is definitely a driver I look for in those kinds of races. And at a track like Richmond, where he's had so much success in the past, it's really hard to believe that he wouldn't be a contender this evening. That said, I would be looking out for the 2311 guys who both have the similar skill set, I would say. And Ryan Blaney, I know he's starting 20th, but listen, he won at Iowa last year, a very similar track type. He obviously knows how to run around a short track and, you know, be disciplined. So I'd be interested to see how that 12 team performs. I got another comment here from Denver before we head out. Brad Keselowski, and see the double standards from the NASCAR fans. I don't know. I think 21st in points is well enough now to kind of justify kind of being in the playoff picture. I think if we're going to do the playoff system going forward, I'd like to see there be a top 20 or a top 25 cutoff in the championship points, and that's not aimed at any particular driver or anything like that. It just has more to do with the legitimacy of the format. I think that having guys like Harrison Burton in the playoffs is kind of an embarrassment to the system itself, and I think that the sport is not better off for having guys like that in the postseason that aren't really going to be a threat for the championship. But I also support completely reducing the amount of drivers we let in the first place. So that'll be a conversation we save for another day. In closing, though, we would love it if you could hit the subscribe button. And we'd also love it if I can talk. We'd also love it if you hit the bell icon to avoid missing any of our shows. A big thank you to our Patreon investors once again, and everyone who has purchased a Super Chat or a Buy Me a Coffee. And for Matthew Bro and for Tanner Smith, thank you for joining Grid Pre-Race for NASCAR, and have a great rest of your day and enjoy the races.